Our guest today in the fast lane really is in the fast lane. She and her political party are enjoying a surge in media coverage and popular support that they hope to ride all the way to the election. She's gone from relative obscurity to being a potential kingmaker. She's happy to be known as Q, but her name is Qiulae Wong, and she is the leader of the Opportunity Party. Well, welcome to the podcast, and very nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to be here.
You've really been on the media circuit a lot in recent months, so this is probably starting to feel very comfortable in front of a microphone for you.
Getting a bit more used to it. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, are you enjoying it? Do you enjoy that side of it?
Yeah, it's been awesome actually. I feel like we get to carry quite a positive and hopeful message this election. So, I think that I do find the conversations energising and hopeful.
That's quite a nice point to make, isn't it? Because you're probably, I assume that when you're going to speak to a group, you probably have a little bit of a luxury that other parties don't have, because you've got a sort of newness about you. Yeah. There won't be too much cynicism about you. You haven't got a track record of failures that people will come and hit you up about. It must be quite nice to speak to what I assume are reasonably sort of open-minded groups with a lot of curiosity.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to being a small party outside of Parliament. Obviously, it's hard to get out there and it's real chicken and egg with the media coverage and polling and things like that. But yeah, you're right. I think without that political baggage, we can be a bit more blue sky in the stuff that we want to talk about and how we can challenge the status quo. And it feels like New Zealanders are more ready for that now than they've ever been before.
Why do you think media is so interested this time around? So it's kind of started with the Seek job ad, I reckon.
Yes, yeah. And props to, I don't know if that was intentional from a media perspective or not from the party, but there's certainly been more interest this year than there ever has been. I think we are doing things differently, and I look and sound different from former leaders, so they probably noticed that. And obviously that's translating, whether it's the time and the context or the way we're messaging things. We are polling better, we're getting more donations, members, all of that kind of thing. So there is definitely some momentum about it this time, which is exciting.
Cool. Well, lots to talk about. First of all, let's just quickly talk about names, if that's okay. So it's the Opportunity Party, not the Opportunities Party.
Yep.
And you're Qiulae Wong, but you're happy to also be known as Q.
Yes.
What about TOP? Is TOP still in the mix, or is TOP gone?
We try not to refer to ourselves as TOP. I appreciate it's still the acronym, so it does still get shortened to that. But we felt like it was important to really go by opportunity, because that explains who we are and what we're about. Whereas for people that haven't heard of us or don't know much about us, TOP just doesn't really mean anything.
It's interesting, that whole opportunities thing. I was sort of thinking about it and trying not to read too much into it, but is there a suggestion that opportunities, plural, obviously suggest there is a range of opportunities. Opportunities singular. Does it carry the same message? I don't know. I don't know if I'm sort of splitting hairs or if there was
I don't think it was that deep. I mean, I do think that there was a bit of a shift in the way that we're talking about the opportunity for New Zealand and that kind of being a really singular focus. It also helps that it's a slightly shorter word than opportunities, which is still very long for a party name and hard to get onto the branding. And I think it kind of rolls off the tongue a bit like National Labour Opportunity as a singular thing.
Yeah, fair enough. And in terms of your own name, Qiulae's not particularly hard to say. So I just wonder why is Q something you've always had all your life, or?
Yeah, it has, I think, started with school. But I actually, so very confusingly, my brother and sister's names also start with Q. And so I copied my older sister, who got called Q by her friends, because I thought it was really cool. And so, it has been a nickname since then. And I do, I think as I've gotten older, tried to go more by Qiulae. I suppose growing up as someone who's half Chinese, you just want to make it easy and fit in, and, Q was a way of doing that. But now it is my nickname.
It also helps that it's quite cool.
Yeah,
right?
007, I get that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could be a lot worse. I don't know what would be a bad single letter to go by, but something like W, maybe not so much, but Q is cool. Now, I happen to know that you got here by train today. You mentioned earlier to me. And being an MTA podcast, we're naturally interested in how people get about and what they drive and that sort of thing. So are you a driver, and if so, of what?
I do have a car. We've got a Tesla Model Y that my husband and I share. We lived in London for 9 years, so we didn't have a car at all during that time. But when we moved back in 2022, we had a 18-month-old at the time, and it's just pretty hard to live in New Zealand without a car. So we have it, but we try to use public transport where we can.
And getting a Tesla was an environmental choice or a back pocket choice?
A bit of both. There was obviously the clean car discount at the time, so that helped with the decision. We were looking at a range of hybrids and electric vehicles. We had initially ruled out Teslas because we thought it would be way too expensive, but it was actually comparable to hybrid cars, and that would mean we could save more on fuel. So we thought it was worth it. And
given some of your policies, I assume a big diesel V8 was never really in the equation?
Not really. And I've never been, I guess, a big car person in terms of wanting a really grunty engine or anything. It was more practicality for me getting around, and I like having a car that's got good enough boot space for all the kids' stuff, and those are probably my key criteria.
Have you sort of got any roadie memories or anything like that? Road trips from your youth and that sort of thing? Or brushes with the law you can share with us? Or nothing too career limiting, I promise?
No criminal record or anything. My mum, so we used to go skiing in Queenstown, or we did it a couple of times as a family, and Mum always insisted that we drive from Auckland because we had to see the country and all corners of the country.
Auckland to Queenstown?
Auckland to Queenstown, with a full car, 3 kids, all of our gear. We, had cassette tapes. So there's no Spotify at the time. We basically had 2 cassette tapes that we listened to for about 24 hours as we drove the length of the country. So that's quite an enduring road trip memory for me.
Yeah. How long would that take?
We would usually do it over 2 days, stop somewhere overnight, maybe stay with family in Wellington or something. A couple of times I think we did end up just driving straight through because we were so tired. Like, I don't know, we just wanted to get home, and we'd got that late ferry from Picton to Wellington and then there by midnight. And I would have been, 12, so I wasn't driving, but my mum and my brother, I think, shared the driving.
That is
through
an
the
epic
night.
trip.
Yeah.
And then what, for 2 or 3 days skiing in the middle? Or?
Yeah, maybe 4 or 5, about a week trip in the school holidays would usually be the thing.
Your parents would have, it would have been that classic situation of wanting to come home for a holiday after that, surely, all that driving and stuff.
Yeah, I think as a kid you totally don't even think about that. And I'd love to say we used it to learn lots about the countryside, but I think we just slept in the car most of the time.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But I do remember stopping in, lots of random towns and stopping for a snack and
I'm sure it wasn't tapes, though. It must have been CDs. You're not old enough to have had tapes.
It was definitely cassette tapes. I remember one of them was Qiulae. And
Qiulae?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I think it was about the time of, transition to CDs, but cars were still very much cassette tapes.
And a lot of good memories associated with tapes, actually. I am one of those people that refuses to embrace new technology, so I still have a cassette Walkman that I listen to music on.
Wow.
And my car obviously doesn't take tapes or even CDs now, which I think is a real bummer.
Yeah.
Actually, I really hate the fact that you are forced to use Spotify in the car. I don't know what Tesla has, but I actually find that really annoying.
Yeah, actually there is no choice. It's just that. Or I suppose you can put stuff through your phone through Bluetooth. But
yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like a technology takes a step backwards when they go forwards, if you know what I mean. The simplicity of just having CDs in the car, there's a lot to be said for it. Yeah. Anyway, still talking about on the subject of travel, have you had that kind of internal debate with yourself yet about if you get to Parliament and there's a lot of driving and flying associated with it? Now, we had Qiulae Wong in here actually at the start of the year, and we talked about this quite a lot. Because obviously their position is probably even stronger than yours, if I can say that, when it comes to low emission travel and all the rest of it. But feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And she did acknowledge that she drives and obviously flies quite a lot for the role. And in short, her sort of view of it was you have to work with the system that currently exists to build a better system for the future.
Yeah.
But have you wrestled with that kind of thing yourself a wee bit?
Yeah, a bit. And I do remember a few years back, somebody did a study on the emissions of everyone going to COP. It's like tens of thousands of people flying all around the world to come together to figure out how to reduce emissions. It's quite ironic. But they calculated the emissions that could be saved if they had productive in-person conversations. And it was, a huge magnitude more than the emissions of flying there. So I think there's a bit of that as well. It's like what's the purpose of that trip? And if it's going to have a productive outcome, which leads to things like lower emissions or a better New Zealand, then that trade-off is worth it.
Yeah, so you won't sort of feel the need to apologise to yourself every time you get on a plane. I think no. Chloe does a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely feel the guilt, and I wish that, an Auckland to Wellington train would be pretty cool. But yeah, I think there's truth in what she said. You've got to work with the system that you've got and make sure that when you make those trips, they're as worth it as possible.
Although now that you've shared your story about driving from Auckland to Queenstown for skiing, you've kind of created an expectation you're just going to drive back and forth to Parliament every week or whatever it might be. So, you've kind of opened
maybe if we had self-driving cars and I could work and drive at the same time.
They're coming, supposedly. Yeah. I don't know when, but supposedly they are. But let's talk about the party and where the party is these days, which is generating a lot of buzz and a lot of interest, which is great. But when I told colleagues that we were going to be talking today, almost invariably the first reaction was, is that Gareth Morgan's party? And he does throw a long shadow, doesn't he? I mean, do you come across that a lot?
Yeah, definitely. Less so now. I think when I first started in the role about 7 months ago, and I was new and people hadn't really heard much from the party over the last couple of years, that's the first thing that people reach for. And he was a larger-than-life character, so people obviously remember a few of the comments that he's made and things like that.
Yes, actually, on that, for the record, what is your position on cats? We might as well get that out there now.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a pet cat. I've had a pet cat before. My husband would love to get one, but I'm just like, we've got a 5 and a 2-year-old, so we're busy enough as it is, but maybe one day. I actually don't think it was ever a policy of Gareth's, but he obviously made that comment which just hit the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you speak with him? Have you ever had a conversation with him?
No, never spoken with him.
Really?
Yeah, and I think he stepped back pretty much immediately after that first election, and it's been really run by other people since then. Yeah. And he hasn't funded the party or anything like that. So, there's a lot that has changed since then. We've learned a lot as a party. There's still some core values, I think, that remain, and things like our tax policy is essentially what he started the party for. So I do hope that we are bringing to life some of the things that he intended, but also, growing up as a party, matured, and hopefully being able to have that impact inside Parliament.
And that kind of preempted what I was going to ask, which is whether the party now bears any real resemblance to the party then, and really it's probably not a lot, is it?
I think, as I mentioned, there are some core ideas that the party stands for. I think we've always been a party that's about systemic change and taking a long-term view, and I don't think that's changed at all. And we still have some stalwarts that have been there since the very beginning, and that's actually been one of the coolest parts of joining and as the leader, is getting to know some of those people, because they're pretty incredible. They've campaigned for this party since the very beginning, gone through the ups and downs, the heartbreak of losing 3 times at elections, and they're still here and they're still committed. And I think it's pretty remarkable.
Pretty awesome. What about the logo that you guys have, which is the sort of semicircle? Now, I was sort of trying to read into this, and I'm guessing, my read is it's the sun coming up.
You got it.
All right, great. I can honestly say I did not research that.
Good.
That was
nice.
Could equally be a sun going down.
I don't think we've put it out there anywhere. I've never talked about it.
Yay for me. It actually reminded me, I don't know if your kids or if you were ever into Pokemon, but Ash, the main character in Pokemon, he wears a trucker cap, quite often has a logo almost identical to your logo. Just as an FYI. I don't think you're in any danger copyright-wise, but I mention that. Yeah. But the colour choice, the teal, deliberate?
Yep, very deliberate. And it has been part of the party for a while as well, so that's not new. I think they did have, 2020 they started talking about the teal wave with the Opportunity Party, or TOP back then. And it is, it's the blue-green mix. We've seen the rise of the teal independent movement in Australia. It is that political party which stands for pro-business, sort of pro-growth and economy, but also pro-environment.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the party and where you are now heading into the election. And first of all, the 5% threshold has really been the bridge too far for the party today. I don't think we're sort of giving away anything there. How confident are you of crossing it this time? And please don't say we're very confident this far out, because that is the first and biggest hurdle for you, isn't it?
It is. But our polling this year is better than it's ever been before. I'm not going to say I'm very confident, but we've reached 6% in the Roy Morgan poll, and we're averaging 3.5 in the others, which tend to rank us a bit lower than the Roy Morgan. And it's the strongest polling we've ever had. So we did take a moment a few weeks ago, I think, to reflect and be stoked with where we are, but we recognise we've still got a long way to go, a big mountain to climb. So we know that we just need to keep doing what we're doing, keep getting out there, talking to Kiwis, spreading the word. We've got 43 candidates across the country, which is the most we've ever stood up. So that'll really help, I think, to get the message out into communities as well.
And presumably the biggest fear is the fear of the wasted vote. When it comes to voters, I'm talking about the fear of the wasted vote. And if I can sort of share an experience for myself, in 2023, I did the Vote Compass exercise on TVNZ. And for people listening who aren't familiar with the Vote Compass, basically it's something that TVNZ has hosted since for about 15 years, I think, going back. I used to work at TVNZ, and I remember when we brought it in. And basically all you do is you feed into it all the things that are important to you and what sort of policy change you would like to see. And at the end of it, it spits out which party or parties you are most aligned with in terms of your political beliefs.
Yep.
So I did that exercise, and I was really surprised, I'm not making this up, that my two choices, which were virtually neck and neck, was 1% between them, was a major political party, and I won't say of which colour, and Opportunity.
Yeah.
And I was really, really surprised.
Yeah.
And it actually, on the plus side, it made me look a lot more at you guys and think, maybe I should. I didn't actually know very much about it. But then on the other hand, I just thought, well, at that stage, whenever I did the exercise, probably was polling around 2%. And I just sort of thought, look, interesting, and I can see a lot here that I like. But if I vote for these guys, it's going to be a wasted vote. So I voted for the other lot. And that must happen a lot, not necessarily going through the Vote Compass exercise, but people who are sort of wavering, they don't want to take a punt, and they want to make sure their vote counts for something. It's hard to overcome that, isn't it?
It is, and I've heard that story a lot, that people that have got us in the Vote Compass survey in particular, it's very common. But one story that I have heard a few times is they did that, they voted for a different party because they worried about the wasted vote. And actually after the election, or a year or two on, they feel like they wasted their vote by voting for that other party, because actually what we got is 3 more years of the same, whether it's a national-led or a Labour-led government. What I think people are feeling really frustrated about is the lack of meaningful change on the big things that are really pressing, things like climate action, superannuation bills. These are big challenges that we have to tackle as a country. And I think we need a fresh party like Opportunity to come in with some new ideas. And
it probably speaks something to the Kiwi psyche a little bit, right? I mean, it's a bit slow to embrace something new. I think that's probably fair to say. I don't want to be too critical of my fellow Kiwi, but I think it does take time for Kiwis to get their head around something new, especially when it's politics. I mean, there's still a lot of people enmeshed in the kind of left-right, national, almost the first past the post system. That shadow also looms quite large. And I just think it probably does take time for a momentum to build where you've been on the landscape long enough that people will start thinking, okay, I want to support them and I can see what they're doing and that they have some stickability.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is starting to shift where I actually get the wasted vote question a lot less now. because we're polling higher and we've been in the media a lot more. But now the question people are asking is, are you left or are you right? What's your coalition strategy going to be? Yeah. And that's the next kind of hurdle that we have to overcome.
There's a certain sort of momentum that you need to gather, isn't there, for it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I don't know quite what that is. I mean, media coverage helps, polling helps, and you do see it in politics a lot, don't you, that somebody will get on a roll or a party will get on a roll and all of a sudden they're being spoken of as a future leader or a future government or whatever it might be. And maybe sometimes it's a catalyst like Jacinda Ardern, had the catalyst of Andrew Little standing aside and, whoosh, rockets are up or whatever it might be. But you almost need that something just to give you that momentum.
Yeah, and I think it is partly timing, it's the context and having the right message for the right time. And we are starting to feel a bit of that, but it does also take a lot of continued hard work, which is really what we're continuing
And every
to do.
appearance on things like the MTA podcast helps.
Exactly.
There we go.
So
that's why we're here. So, all right, so let's assume you get over the line and you get into Parliament, opportunities in Parliament, excuse me. There's been a lot of talk about opportunity being potential kingmakers. Everybody loves to use the kingmaker term if it's, if Parliament is sort of close to deadlock. But to me, that term's not really appropriate. And please tell me if I've got this wrong, because from everything or most of what I've seen of your policy, you would pick a left-wing, being part of a left-wing coalition than a right-wing coalition any day of the week. Right?
Oh, that's a bold call.
Well, the reason I say that, I guess I'm looking at it through the ideological lens of the environment and emissions and healthcare and education, which I think would probably trump you joining a right-wing coalition. But obviously, if I have this wrong, please correct me. But it feels to me like that would be your more natural bedmate. Have I got that wrong?
Honestly, we really are very open to working with either Labour or National. I don't think that the environment belongs to the left, and I think it's really important, particularly today for young people. They might come from right-wing families, but they've really grown up with climate change as a pressing problem, and I don't think you have to choose between having a thriving, productive economy and looking after nature, and that's exactly what we stand for. So I think it's really important from an environmental lens in particular to be able to work across the political spectrum. Otherwise, 50% of the time you'll have no representation for nature in Parliament whatsoever.
Yeah, and I take your point it doesn't belong to Labour or the left, but it's more that it doesn't belong to the other side, I would suggest.
I think that other national governments have been more progressive on environmental issues than the current one. And I don't know if that's the current National Party or if it's because they've been pushed that way from their coalition partners. I can't speak to that. But I've been to a National Blue-Green forum back in the day through a previous career, and there were some really progressive thinkers that cared passionately about the environment. So I think that's kind of muddies the left-right thing a bit. I think there's also policies that we stand for. I think our tax policy often gets pegged as a left-wing thing, but it's actually just as much about tax cuts for working people as it is about looking after the vulnerable. And that's a right-wing thing, is tax cuts and minimal income tax. Yep. So I think that there's ways for us to negotiate with both sides. And I think that that's really important in an MMP system, that we don't just have a left block and a right block, because otherwise we may as well just have first past the post.
Yeah, totally.
You look at places like Germany, where they've got more advanced MMP systems, and they have a lot more of parties working with different coalitions. And even, I think back to when I was at university, was sort of the John Key era with, they had a Greens and Te Pāti Māori. I don't think it was quite a coalition, but they had a confidence and supply agreement. And they had some really great policies and outcomes from that. Yeah.
So for the record, is there any party that you would say we cannot work with these guys in coalition?
I think there are, we will genuinely sit down at the table with anyone to try and find common ground. I think there are particular policies that we would have to walk away from. And one example I would use is something like a treaty principles bill that just goes against what we believe in, and we couldn't support that. So we'd have to walk away.
Okay. And have you had sort of conversations? Are you at the point where you can have conversations with the leaders or senior members of any of the parties? Have you sort of sat down with Winston Peters or?
We haven't had any formal discussions. I've had the privilege of meeting lots of them at events and being on panels with them, and we have the odd chat, but nothing formal about what coalition agreements would look like.
And what is their response to you? I mean, do they genuinely see you as a contender, or is there a little bit of an element of, I don't want to say condescension, but is there an element of, you've got a long way to go before we take you seriously kind of thing?
Yeah, I think more so in the beginning, it was the strategy is always ignore for as long as you can and hope that they go away. But I think it has started to shift a little bit, and we've put out some really strong policies. So energy, for example, and we were speaking at the Electrify Queenstown conference with some, notable leaders from across the different parties, and I think that they recognised that we had a strong voice and place in that conversation.
Yeah, and turning to policy, and I have to say, I mean, I try not to listen too much to other interviews you've done with people like Guyan and Jack Tame and co, because I didn't want to be too influenced by it. So I did have a good look at your website. I have to say, really impressive, actually.
Thank you.
The range of policy and the thought that's gone into it and the depth of it, I was really impressed. Whether you support it or not, you can't help but think, well, there's nothing amateurish about this.
Well, we are the policy woke party. I mean, we've been working on some of those policies for a decade, and some very bright minds putting a lot of effort into that. So, it
really is impressive. So it'd be quite good to sort of delve into a few of those. I think we'll go through the full range, but we'll have a bit of a chat about some of those later. But perhaps first, if we sort of, rather than policy, if we could just sort of talk about philosophy and what is basically the philosophy of the party. I mean, there are references on the website to the parliamentary system sort of being broken or not working for Kiwis and that kind of thing. So what's the philosophical overview or purpose of the party?
I guess, as I've sort of already talked a bit about our values in terms of that long-term thinking, and it's in the name. Opportunity is our purpose, and it's around trying to create opportunity for all Kiwis. And we really believe in that balance of economic, social and environmental, and that's what creates a prosperous country. I think if you look at the way we've bucketed our policies, we've sort of got three areas. There's democracy or fixing politics. There's building a new economy, so recognising that some of the rules of the last 40 years don't serve us anymore. And then there's restoring nature. So I think as a philosophy, when it comes to what we think New Zealand needs, it's really a strong democracy, a future-focused economy, and one which recognises the role of nature. And that's how we approach trying to solve problems. We also think that New Zealanders deserve to have honest conversations about hard stuff, and we don't shy away from that. I think all too often, either whether it's for media headlines or because politicians think that the average punter can't comprehend the complexity, we simplify some of these policy arguments, whereas opportunity is here to have the hard conversations and do it in an accessible way, because that's what voters deserve. And
it feels very focused, if that's the right word, for the young voter. I reckon a lot of your policies would appeal to younger voters particularly. Yep. Is that a conscious thing, or do you agree with that, first of all, that it's likely to have that appeal?
I think given that we really take that intergenerational focus, it naturally aligns with what young people want to see for their future. But we do also get a lot of older people, and actually a lot of their sort of OG top supporters from Gareth's days that come to the events still. They are really voting for the next generation. It's not about them. They're thinking, and that's ideally how we should all vote, is what's for the greater good. But it's quite amazing seeing how many older people are interested in what we have to say, because they're thinking about their kids and their grandkids.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is that kind of where your support is sort of building at both ends of that kind of age scale? Oh, that's very interesting.
I'd say our core is probably the middle-aged professional who has grown up aware of some of these issues around, increasing superannuation bills and climate change and our infrastructure deficit, and they want new solutions to those problems. That's probably our core, but then I think at either end we've got young people who want a more aspirational vision for their future, and older people who've maybe seen all of that and go, it's really time for some new ideas.
And one of those new ideas is the citizen's voice idea, right? So explain that one to us a wee bit. Now, I did like how on your website you described it as your best nerdy idea yet. I thought that was awesome. So how does that work in a nutshell?
it's definitely one for the democracy nerds. But it's tried and proven both overseas and here in New Zealand. The idea is that you get a topic which can be really difficult. Often it's one where there's some political gridlock. So we might take in New Zealand superannuation or our infrastructure pipeline, for example, and you get together a representative group of a society, whether it's nationwide or if it's Auckland focused, you might get the accurate demographics of that community. They come together over a series of probably 3 or 4 weekends, and they get presented with the options.
And these are just Joe Blow citizens. We're not talking economists, lawyers.
No, just everyday citizens, a bit like jury duty. So you'd get a call up and you can come along and participate. And I think one of the critical things is it cannot go ahead until you have that representative, accurate representation of the demographics.
That in itself could take a while though, right?
It could, but people also get paid. So a bit like jury duty, you get paid for your time, which means more people are likely to accept. And so the way it works is people come together, you get experts that come in and present the solution. So they're not coming up with the solutions themselves. Right. Someone might come in and say, well, this is the benefit of doing trains versus roads or, whatever the different options are. And then they have to deliberate. They have to chat with each other, understand different perspectives. And the beauty of that is not just that you get a better decision at the end of it that more people are brought on board with. But I think it's really good for citizens to understand different perspectives as well, and realise that those diverse perspectives are actually what makes our society great.
So would the I'm trying to remember the word you use. Is assembly that you call them? The
citizens.
Yeah, I know it's the citizens' voice, but I'm just trying to remember the actual word for the group. But anyway, with the group of citizens, would they have to be unanimous in their recommendation?
So we set the rules, but normally how it works is 80% have to feel like the solution is good enough. Right. So it might not be their first choice, but they need to get to a point where 80% of that room is in agreement that they will accept that decision, essentially. So it's not about one perspective kind of getting majority over the other. It's about convincing most people in the room that this is a good enough solution that you could live with. And
do you think, it sounds terrible to sort of voice it this way, but are those people qualified to make this decision if we're talking about issues on the magnitude that you've sort of suggested?
Well, I think that's where the expert evidence and solutions comes in. So they're not coming up with these ideas themselves. They are looking at the options in front of them and looking at the trade-offs, because really, it's very rare that there is a black and white answer to any of these things. We could choose to build and prioritise our money on roads if we wanted to, but that might mean different things for our emissions, for our ability to get around the country affordably. There's different trade-offs that we just have to make. And that's where it's the experience of everyday citizens that matter, to have that conversation and go, well, this is the future that we want to invest in.
And do you think they'll be able to put aside their political allegiances so they're not just falling in line with whatever party they happen to vote for?
Yeah, I think, and the examples prove that that's the case. So
because it's worked overseas, isn't it?
Yeah, the most interesting example, I think, is in Ireland, where they had a national citizens' assembly on marriage equality and another one on abortion. And for a country that is predominantly Catholic, those are really difficult conversations, and you can imagine probably quite divided on political lines. But having that open conversation and getting people to really understand different people's perspectives had a really beneficial outcome, not just for being able to reach a decision, but for that sense of social cohesion.
And was it accepted by the general population?
Yeah. There's really positive testimonials from people that participated. Right. They went ahead with, the decisions. So the other part of it is that the Citizens' Assembly makes recommendations to Parliament. It's not usually binding, but it's pretty rare for those recommendations to be rejected, and they usually have to have very strong grounds for going against the views of that group.
It seems to me, maybe with those issues maybe they fall into this category, but it seems to me that it would work best on something that's a yes-no, rather than finding a solution to a big open-ended question. So this might be a frivolous example, but the flag debate. Should we change the flag? Feels to me like, yes, we had referendums and all the rest of it, but it seems to me that a good way to have cut through all of that would be by the citizens' voice.
Yeah, that would have been great. I reckon if we had the shortlist in a citizens' assembly, then deciding between three, for example, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 that was,
in the end,
rather than it be should we change it or not, I reckon you take the shortlist to the group and then they decide, because we might have had a different outcome, I reckon.
Well, it would have been, I don't know, maybe even the first step could have been at least put, so you're thinking keep the referendum for the first step perhaps of should we change it, and then use the citizens' voices to what option we should pick.
I reckon you'd just skip that first bit and go, do we have the existing flag and maybe have then 2 other alternatives. So then part of the discussion is should we change it at all? And then the group might rule out, keeping the existing one.
It's an interesting example. It's just because ironically, and this only just occurred to me, so I don't feel like I've set you up or anything, but if it had been left to Canada to decide on the flag, it would never have changed to the maple leaf because people there hated the maple leaf and the government unilaterally decided it. And now everybody loves the maple leaf.
Yeah.
So they got there in the end. But maybe they wouldn't have here. But it's an interesting one. Do you think the parties would support that?
I think they would. I don't think it puts them at risk really in any way. It's something that strengthens democracy. So if you're in this job, I hope that you have a love for democracy, and this is something which is proven to engage citizens more in politics. And so it should be a no-brainer.
And I do love that part of it, that it would help people feel involved, because there is a real feeling, isn't there? You throw your vote every 3 years, you cast your vote, and that's it. You don't get another say, really, do you?
Yeah.
So it is a great way for people to be involved and have a say. And what's wrong with that? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think practically you'd have a lot of challenges, but I'm sure you could overcome those with will.
Yeah, and so Switzerland is the extreme example. They have basically 4 citizens' referendums a year. So it's very regular. They vote once a quarter on an issue that can be brought to the public by citizens. And what's quite interesting there is it's had the effect of kind of keeping politicians in check a bit more, because they won't go and make outrageous changes that they know that the public won't accept, because the public can then bring that back to veto, in the next 6 months. So it has this sort of check and balance power on the way that politicians behave as well, which is also interesting.
Does it go too far though? Does it then become a handbrake on politicians making brave decisions?
No, I think you find that equilibrium, and I think the point where it's got to in Switzerland is they don't always have really high engagement in those referendums, because sometimes it's an issue that only a portion of society really cares about. But they're also not as big and divisive type topics either. Something like the gender definition bill, like they just sort of end up steering away from those things because they know that that's not a useful public debate to have.
Yeah. Switzerland, renowned for its neutrality, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, they live and breathe it every year.
Interesting. It's such an interesting idea, that one, and I hope that there is a place for that, because philosophically it just feels like such a good step to take. So I wish you well with that one. Also on the list, the citizens' income.
Yes.
That's a really interesting one. So this is basically 19 grand in the pocket a year of every New Zealander, or is it
over the age of 18?
Over the age of 18. So why not, first of all, means test that a little bit, because a lot of people don't need an extra 19 grand a year.
Yep.
So what's the philosophy behind giving everybody that amount of money?
Yeah, so it's about simplifying our welfare system. Currently, our welfare system is extremely complicated and tangled, and it's really hard for people who need the support to get it, because you've got to jump through so many hoops to get there. At the same time, the idea around a citizen's income being universal is that it's much easier to support people in different stages of their life when they might find themselves out of a job or needing to care for a loved one, even recognising the role of usually mums or women in society who don't get paid as much to do the work that they do. And that savings that you make in bureaucracy are more than the kind of worth it in terms of the benefits that you get for that universality. And yes, there will be some people that might not need it, that receive it. But I think the other thing to remember is this is part of a tax package that we're proposing. So on the other hand, we've got a land value tax. So those who are more well off are likely to own property, and probably more expensive property, and will pay their fair share in land value tax, which will cancel out pretty much what they receive in a citizen's income.
Cool. So let's come to the land value tax in a second, but just staying with the citizen's income. I am not an economist. I'm terrible with this stuff, but it seems to me that just injecting another 19 grand into everybody's salaries every year, is that going to be an inflationary aspect to that?
Well, that's why I think it's important to see it as the package, because we're not actually adding much more to society. We're taking away just as much almost in the land value tax, so it wouldn't have that inflationary effect. For those who are on low incomes, they would see a significant difference in their back pocket. For kind of median incomes that own their own property, they'll be about net neutral, so they'll be paying in a land tax what they'll receive in a citizen's income. So not changing how much they pay, but where we tax it from. And then for those at the higher end, they'll be paying a bit more.
Okay. Did I read correctly on your website that you're basically going to be doing away with the 2,000 jobs at the Ministry of Social Development as a result of this?
That is what we estimate, that not that we would axe those jobs, but they could be repurposed to something more useful rather than having to fill out forms and tick check boxes that somebody still deserves to receive a benefit.
Okay.
There's a lot of waste in that system at the moment. You've got people sitting on a phone for 8 hours a day trying to get through to work and income to tell them how many nights their girlfriend slept over that week and how that affects their accommodation supplement. It's an outdated and tangled system that isn't really delivering.
Possibly, but it's a very bold call to basically say you will be getting away or, changing the jobs of 2,000 people within MSD. I mean, it's probably not going to win you a lot of votes in Wellington.
I think that those jobs could become much more meaningful, that they're actually helping people upskill and careers that would be meaningful for them, or being able to spend more time on the front line with people who have more complex needs. And we would keep some top-ups for things like disability support, child support, for those that have complex needs and need that support from government. And then those people could actually be spending their time with them rather than the masses.
All right. Very good. Maybe if I was to make a friendly suggestion, maybe you go back to the wording on the website and have a little tinker with that, because I don't think that's very clear.
Okay, yeah.
Certainly my takeaway from that was 2,000 jobs are going to go.
Yeah.
So take that or leave that as you so choose, but I reckon that could be slightly refined so it's a little more palatable, but that's just one man's opinion.
Yeah.
In terms of the land tax, how does that work? Is it residential private property? Is it commercial property? Is it both? How does it all work?
Yeah, the intention here is to keep it broad. So it is everything. There are some exceptions, things like conservation land, iwi land, or publicly owned land, but it's residential, commercial, rural. There is a lower rate for rural land, so it's 1.75% on urban and 0.5% on rural, and that's just on the value of the land itself, so not the whole property. So you'll usually in your rates bill, or you'll see that broken out into two different figures. And the idea here is that we have a really big challenge around housing affordability in New Zealand, and we don't tax property like most other countries in the OECD do. We don't have a capital gains tax. We don't have a stamp duty.
Where do you stand on that, by the way, capital gains tax?
We think a land value tax would do the job better, because if you have a capital gains tax, people will just continue to land bank, for example, and avoid paying the tax. Whereas if you pay a small annual tax on the value of the land, then you're less likely to hold on to land unnecessarily, or you'll actually develop it so it can be sold and made into townhouses, and families can benefit from affordable housing. So that's really what the problem we're trying to tackle here. And as I mentioned, it's combined with the citizen's income. So it's about shifting some of the burden off income tax and onto property. We recognise that this is a huge move for New Zealand, though, and we've outlaid a 10-year implementation plan. And on top of that, I think we're not so naive to think that as a small party entering Parliament for the first time, we're necessarily going to be able to do tax reform overnight. Changes this big are made at the cabinet table. You need to get buy-in from more parties. You need to have majority to get this through. And so I think it's important for voters to understand that what we're setting out here is a vision for the long term for New Zealand that we think we need to get to if we want our kids and our grandkids to be able to afford to buy a house, if we think we can become more resilient around AI joblessness. We think that this is really the toolbox that we need to get there. But let's have a conversation about it. And there might be improvements to be made. But we think ultimately we need to get there. And if we don't start talking about it, it's going to make it even harder for our kids to make this decision in another 10, 20, 30 years' time.
So, and this might be a bit of a naive question, but how do you sell the land value tax idea to farmers? Because they could potentially be big losers out of that.
Well, they'll receive the citizens' income as well. And actually, often on a farm, you'll have more than two people living there. You might have two generations. It's, two families, could be 4 citizens' incomes. That's 40 grand a year to offset the land tax. In addition to that, we want to incentivise farmers to turn more of their land into native forests, for example, or wetlands, which would give you a reduction in your tax bill. And so we're incentivising different uses of land through that mechanism to encourage farmers to diversify their land use.
And would that outweigh the punitive effect of the tax, though?
Yeah, we think so. I mean, I think in most cases, farmers would also be better off when you combine the citizens' income and the land value tax. Okay. There are some areas of rural property where the return that they make on that land is already very low, and that's where it's hardest. And that's where we want to really encourage and reward farmers for making more high value use of that land. And I know it's not simple to do overnight, but I think this is part of a longer term shift for New Zealand.
And what about corporate and private tax rates as well? Any tinkering with those?
We have kept them as they are for our tax policy, but we would be open to lowering the corporate tax rate, particularly if that helps with the easing of increase in KiwiSaver contributions. So we do also have a policy around getting to a compulsory KiwiSaver 6+6.
Which is very
scheme.
close to the national policy.
It is.
Right?
It is, yep. And yeah, so supportive of them, and I congratulate them on that announcement. We'd be definitely supporting that through.
That whole area of superannuation is just ripe for cross-party accord, isn't it? It just feels ridiculous that we cannot get together and work that one out.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think that's where a citizens' assembly could be quite interesting to look at. Is it fairer to raise the age or means test, and at what time period, and how long do we give people, when should we introduce compulsory KiwiSaver? I think having that conversation, because it is all about trade-offs and different generations and therefore what we can afford as a country, would be a great conversation to have.
I, for one, am sick of hearing superannuation being called a ticking time bomb because, it really is. It's, successive governments have just kicked the can down the road. Yeah. And you do wonder at what point we can't do that anymore, somebody has to make a decision sooner or later.
Yeah, and I think we already, 25% of our budget goes towards superannuation, and that means, the bigger that gets, the less we can spend on hospitals and schools and roads and trains and all of the other things that we need to have a well-functioning society. So I think it's already having an effect.
What about emissions and sort of clean air policies? And I guess being MTA podcast and a lot of members listening, particularly through an automotive lens, what are you sort of proposing there? How are you going to get more clean cars in? And equally important, what are you going to do about the high emitting vehicles that may be 20 years old that we have a lot of on our roads? So what are your plans there? And full marks, I should say, first of all, for identifying that building electric business fleets is a big part of the solution because that's smart, basically. But so what's the sort of general approach there?
So as you mentioned, our kind of key focus here would be incentivising business fleets to convert to electric. The economics stack up in a lot of cases, but they sometimes need sort of that extra push or benefit. So we've proposed tax benefits for corporates that invest in electrification. We've not proposed bringing back any subsidies in the short term, and that's purely, really because we do think the economics do stack up now. And with the fuel crisis, homes, everyday families are looking to electrification, whether that's their cars or their homes, en masse, because they can see it so clearly now. So I think the market is already moving in that direction, which is awesome. But we do need to support particularly the lower income households to make that shift more equitably.
And how do you do that?
So we have proposed, or we've supported the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, which would help people put in electric vehicle charges in their homes, and not have to pay that all up front themselves. They could take that as a loan through their local council. Also things like the Warmer Kiwi homes, expanding that to include electrification, not just insulation, because that means that we'll be lowering electricity bills, which is better for those lower income households. So really targeting that support at the lower income to make sure that transition is equitable.
And a lot of those people in that income bracket, they're still probably driving, a lot of them are still driving a petrol fuel vehicle, an ICE vehicle. And that's, I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of addressing that end as well. I mean, to solve the problem of emissions from the fleet, part of the solution is bringing in zero emission vehicles or low emission vehicles, for sure. But we've got the second oldest fleet in the OECD. We've got a lot of vehicles on the road that are high emission, but the incentive for a family who might be doing it a little bit tough to get out of that vehicle and upgrade to a electrified vehicle, it's not really there for a lot of families. And they're kind of squished on both sides. They can't afford to upgrade to an electric vehicle because of the initial outlay, but they're also getting hammered on the fuel side of things because petrol, as we all know, is more expensive than it used to be. So it's very hard and to see the solution that's sort of at both ends there. But do you have any thoughts around that sort of those older vehicles that might be more high emitting and how we address that side of things?
Well, I think with that shift of the corporate fleet to electric, you then also get a second-hand market, which is much more affordable. And if you even put a deadline on that all corporate fleet by a certain date needs to be electric where possible, you really, that means the second-hand market will really get flooded with more electric vehicles over time. So I think that's one solution for that. It's tricky because you don't want to penalise or tax low-income households for having a non-electric vehicle, and so it's about making sure that those options are available to them. And I think also investing in things like public transport and making that more affordable. We've actually got a free public transport policy to support those that can take public transport in their local area.
Yeah, which I guess is better for more urbanised areas perhaps.
But not all. Yeah, exactly. I completely accept that it doesn't work for everyone.
What do you think, incidentally, will be the big push-button election issues this time around? Cost of living, obviously.
Cost of living, definitely, but that shows up in quite a lot of different ways. Energy is a big one this year that is a real cost of living issue now, and the fuel crisis obviously made that front of mind for people, and the conversation around what does our energy mix look like in New Zealand so that it's resilient and affordable for the long term. So I think that will be a big issue. I think there is something around trust in politics. It feels like it's getting quite nasty and quite divisive, and I'm certainly hearing from a lot of New Zealanders that they're really sick of that rhetoric and sick of the flip-flop going, whether it's a national-led or a Labour-led government and swinging more from one extreme to the other. Whether I talk to teachers or doctors, nurses, business people, all kinds, they are feeling the same challenge, which is being pulled from left and right constantly, makes you feel like you're just stagnating or even worse, going backwards. So I think people want to see some stability, some grown-up conversations, some thinking about the long term, and cost of living, I think, is part of that. How are we going to make sure New Zealand is affordable and we have a thriving economy for the next decade or two?
Yeah, I think that's very true because there is a little bit of a sort of pervading sense of doom at the moment. I don't want to overstate it, but you know what I mean? A lot of people are feeling a bit down in the dumps. They've either lost their job or they're worried about losing their job. There's a lot of pressure on the household budget. All the good times that we've been told are coming have not come,
Yeah.
basically, and your house your house value hasn't gone up, your mortgage rate hasn't come down, and the problem is that that's one thing, but if you can see the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, you can kind of live with it.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's actually quite hard to see that light, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And it's really hard to see where most of the political parties want to take New Zealand by 2050. And so that's what we're trying really hard to do, is paint a clear picture of what future we think Aotearoa New Zealand could have if we can come together, bring the different political parties together, set an inspiring vision and a long-term plan. If we go back to Ireland as an example, in the 1990s, they had a really intentional shift towards that long-term vision and plan. And we can't take all the same, we're a different country, different geography, so we can't lift and shift everything, but that concept of parties actually agreeing this is where we're going. We're going to be a high-tech country. We're going to be low emissions. We're going to, have high-value jobs and businesses here, and we set a course and stick to that. Then I think we'll start to see a shift in attitudes.
And is there a bit of an identity crisis at play for New Zealand here? Because, we obviously agriculture is still a huge contributor to the economy, and tourism is still a big contributor. I'm not sure if it's as big as it was, but we've in the past we've sort of promoted ourselves as quite a sort of tech savvy economy, but I just sort of feel that maybe some of that direction is lacking a wee bit, and it does talk to that 2050 sort of plan that you're referring to. I mean, what does the future of New Zealand look like? Where are we going to grow our economy? Where are the jobs going to be? Where are we going to make our mark on the world stage?
Yeah. But there are some great green shoots, people already doing amazing things in agriculture and tourism, that those will continue to be core to our economy. But we also can innovate and modernise and continue to lead the world on those things. And so I think celebrating the ones who are doing things differently and championing, the success stories is a really important part of that. And also looking to different sectors that we can grow. Gaming is one, for example, that's starting to really take off in New Zealand, and supporting those sectors with more funding, more support, and making sure that they can stay in New Zealand so that we can create those jobs here is a really important role for the government to play, I think.
What I find interesting is that so far, and there's plenty of time for this to change, but I don't really feel health and education, which are traditional massive election year issues, I don't really feel they're so big this time around, and I don't know why particularly.
Yeah, I'm not sure why not. Certainly the same issues that I've heard, as I mentioned, the flip-flopping is the number one issue that I'm hearing there, and the need for a longer-term plan. So with our health system, how are we going to address our ageing population? That's not an issue that's going to go away. We need, the services and the infrastructure to manage that. And with education, we've had some big reforms. How are we going to make sure that we make the best of those, whether or not you think they're good or bad, the curriculum's good or bad? The reality is we kind of need to keep it moving and improve where we can, rather than necessarily have a government that's going to come in and completely change tack again. So I think they perhaps, maybe they'll become bigger topics closer to the election, because they are really core to a thriving society.
What will stop Kiwis going to live in Australia?
I think that better vision, knowing where we're going as a country. And we're not necessarily going to be able to do anything that's going to dramatically change our lives overnight. And if politicians tell you that your life is going to be 10 times better in a year, necessarily, that's just, I think they're misleading people if they say that. But we can pull together and create a more inspiring vision for New Zealand that's worth staying here for, or worth coming back from overseas to help build. That's what I hear from young people, or people that have lived overseas for 10 years and looking at whether or not to come back. They just want to know that their hard work is going to pay off for something that's worth living in. What's
the party's view on the 3-year electoral cycle, by the way? Would you extend it?
Yeah, we would like to see it moved to 4. I think it's so hard to make change in 3 years, especially when you're spending pretty much the 12 months prior to an election campaigning. You're not really focusing on some of those long-term issues.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. All right, well, leaving aside the party and politics for a wee bit, if we may. Tell us a little bit about your own journey into politics. Was it something that you always wanted to do? I mean, you got the position by applying on Seek, which is just either harebrained or genius or a mix of both. I don't know which one it is. But, I mean, before that point, had you seen yourself going into politics, or did you literally see the ad and think, that could be me?
I actually saw it in the newsletter from the party because I had voted for them in the past, and so was a subscriber of the news. And I immediately replied and said I've got no experience in politics, although I'd done some advocacy work through my various jobs, and just had a conversation with someone, and they convinced me to apply, and I did. And I think having worked in sustainability and climate in the business sector, I was constantly coming up against the need for systemic change, and that government direction is really important if we want to see a permanent shift in the way we do business. And I could either sit on the sidelines and criticise and get frustrated that things weren't moving fast enough, or I can go and try and be part of that solution. I did study law and politics at university, so I think part of me has always been interested in this, but worried about, can you really make change? Is it a world that I want to be in, given the divisiveness and the back and forth and that mudslinging? But I think particularly since having kids, I've been much more impatient for change. And if I'm going to live here for the rest of my life and raise my kids here, I've got to do everything I can. And
that point you make about wanting to enter politics is a good one, because it is real, isn't it? The abuse of politicians, and particularly female politicians. Was that something you weigh up when you do have a young family?
Yeah, definitely. And I spoke to my husband a lot about it when I was at the final stage of accepting the job. And you've got to think seriously about it, whether that's something that you want to confront. And ultimately, I decided that it would be worth it. And I haven't actually had it too bad. There's definitely unfair criticism out there. And I do think that, particularly our female candidates in Opportunity Party get it a lot more than the males. But we've just got to keep pushing and showing that it's really important to have all kinds of voices in politics.
Why has it become more toxic, do you think, in terms of the backlash and the criticism that not just politicians, but I guess mostly politicians that seem to receive these days? And I know it's easy to blame social media or blah, blah, but what do you put it down to?
I do think, I say it's easy to blame social media. I think it does play a big role, because it's really decreased our attention spans. And so those salacious headlines become more important for grabbing people's attention. And then everything gets reduced to a simple headline rather than having a proper conversation, and everyone's in their echo chambers, so they all think that everybody thinks the same as them, when actually there's 100 different viewpoints on something. So I do think that has a big role to play. We're also working harder than we ever have before, and we have less time to spend in our community and connect with fellow citizens. So I think it's really important for us to intentionally try and design spaces and time for communities to come together, because that's how we relate to each other as humans and understand that there's different perspectives out there.
Does it worry you, as the mum of two girls growing up, that the toxicity of the social media landscape and the effect of social media on young people's lives? Is that something that, first of all, does the party have a view on that? I mean, there's obviously various bans being touted and experimented with around the world, but first of all, do you have a party view on it, and do you have a personal view on it as well?
Yeah, I think the ban for social media, as a parent, I completely agree, and I understand, and I don't want my kids using it, and at least until they're 16. But from a policy perspective, we've seen that it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And if people see it as the solution and then don't look at how we could regulate platforms, then that could be dangerous. So we would really like to see more focus on how we regulate algorithms and platforms to be less harmful. I think they're harmful to everyone, including you and me, not just kids, but obviously particularly kids. So I would support support work in that space to see how we could improve. And there's some interesting work happening in Australia on how to regulate platforms as well as having the ban. I think we also need to think about modernising our education system so that we're teaching kids the right skills for the modern day. Devices and AI and all this technology is not going anywhere, but we can intentionally design the way that we teach young people the skills that they need to have around creativity and human connection and asking the right questions.
Because the party supports the sort of dialing back of devices in schools.
Yeah, I think having devices at the right time for the right thing, making sure that they are used to add to learning rather than as a crutch, which I understand sometimes they can be. And I think, teachers are supportive of that as well, not necessarily having devices for everything. But I think things like outdoor education are really important as well. And kids, I think, are craving for cool and interesting stuff to do. And I think if you give it to them, then they will get off their phones.
For sure. Fair enough. And I guess also just in terms of your personal journey through politics, you're standing in Mount Albert. Tough challenge there.
Yep, but we think it's winnable. We're going for it. It's my home. That's where I live, and it's, I think, a community that really represents the future of New Zealand. It's a very diverse electorate, and there's a lot of young people who are impatient for change and want to see a more ambitious vision for the country. So I think it's a great place to have opportunity win its first seat and potentially change the trajectory of politics in New Zealand.
And are you aiming to compete in all of the electorate seats? I know you're in a lot of them now, aren't you?
Yes, we have 43 candidates, but Mount Albert is the only one we are looking to win, really running a two-tick campaign. So everywhere else, the key message is party vote. Across the country, we need to get 150,000 party votes. So if you're in any other electorate other than Mount Albert and you can only give us one vote, make it your party vote.
You are going to be incredibly busy in the next few months, but especially September, October, you are just going to be flat out.
Yeah.
Well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. I thank you very much indeed for coming in and giving us the chance to learn a little bit more about yourself and the party. And
thank you.
I wish you all the very best for the upcoming months. I'm sure everybody will be taking an interest in how you and the party perform and seeing what shakes down on election night. It should be a fascinating contest.
Yeah.
So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Kia ora, thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. That was a really fascinating chat. If you haven't heard our previous episodes, please do check them out on your favourite channel. And while you're there, remember to follow us for future episodes of In the Fast Lane. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you'll do so again soon.